So please join me in welcoming Billy as he presents Remembering Crescent, Logging, and Life on North Manitou.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear back there? Not bad? Probably by the time we get done, it'll be just, well, you didn't hear too much, so. Okay, Logging and Life on Crescent, North Manitou in the little town of Crescent. The inspiration really came to do the book that we're basing everything on here. And it come to be with Aunt Helen White, myself, and Karen going over to a presentation at Empire Town Hall. The late Dave Tehoon had done a article on the Empire Lumber Company. And so that started it, that thought that we ought to be able to do the same thing with the pictures and the info that we had about North Manitou. And so with that, that's the book, and it worked out to be good with a lot of help from a lot of people, and it turned out okay. And yes, we'll have some for sale when we get done, probably. But at any rate, we're not here to sell you a bill of goods. So at the beginning, Crescent is on the west side. Let me jump back a minute. North Manitou Island. If you're not familiar with that, it's about 15,000 acres, 4.5 miles wide, 7 miles long. In the little town of Crescent that you can see over here on the west side. Oh yeah, sorry about that. Well, I guess I've got something messed up here. You'll have to bear with me. There we go. Okay. Well, are we back now? Here we are. We're back now. I'll try to keep my thumb off of 5 buttons at one time. Like I say, the little town of Crescent is over on the west side, right over here. Now, if you're as nervous as I am with your eyes, you might be able to keep up with that dot. If not, well, you probably won't. Over here on the east side, Chicago Cottage Row, people out of Chicago came up way before the turn of the century, and in between and settled with cottages over there, and the life-saving station was always over on the east side. It's about 12 miles out from Leelanau. And ultimately it turned into the life-saving station become the Coast Guard. Okay, back again. Okay, here's how it kind of started out with the logging and the sawmill business out there. In 1906, Henry Hull, Traverse City, owned the Ovalwood Dish Company. It was located on the north end of Boardman Lake. He had a son, Carey Hull, and he was William Carey Hull, and they had a buddy that was a timber cruiser, and his name was Franklin Smith. So they had bought 4,000 acres over on the northwest side, which is above where Crescent is. On the northwest side, they'd bought 4,000 acre timberland to be able to take the timber off from it. So, in their idea of what they needed to have was a dock, sawmill, railroad, and a whole lot of people to make that happen. So ultimately, they were in need of someone that looked after the sawmill, building sawmill and some of the buildings, and looked after that project over there. So they got in touch with A.J. White and Son, which had a sawmill that was operational down in Cedar Run at the time. And they got with him. Now this was in 1906, along in there. So a contract was agreed upon. In 1908, the White family picked up and moved to Crescent. So with that being said, A.J. White was my great granddad, and Esther White Morse was my grandmother. And back to the Helen White and Esther Morse, I know that they belonged to the museum here years ago. So bear with me. So they had in 1906 they had contracted with Monroe Dock and Dredge out of Charlevoix, Michigan. And in 1907 they started this 600-foot dock, and it was 1907, and they had it done in the fall of 1908. Here's a picture of the big wheels bringing down logs for piling for the dock. Now, the big wheels, probably a lot of you people in here are familiar with. If not, they were built by Silas Overpack in 1885, a Wainwright wagon builder down in Manistee. And it really wasn't his idea. It was one of his customers, I understand. But he's the one that built the big wheels. And you'll see a little bit later on what the reason why they worked as opposed to that log laying on the ground. The next thing you see is a ship that was called the Josephine Dresden. Now, the owner of that was Charles Anderson, and he was originally from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and ultimately lived in South Manitou. And he had this ship here was the Dresden, and it was broke free from the dock and sat there and had no way to get it off of there. Though it was loaded with equipment for the mill and lumber for the A.J. White home. Now, after this ship, he had bought the J.S. Krause and continued working with. Now, this is Charles Anderson. It's in the middle there with a check mark above his head. This is on the Dresden before it went astray there. And just about 2 months ago, we come to the conclusion there was a gal that went to school with me, clear from the 6th grade in honor, lives there yet. Their name was Anderson. Her name was Marn. And she got a hold of my book here somehow, and she called me up and she says, you know, that's my granddad sitting at the table. I said, you've got to be kidding. She said, no, he was born in 1855. And that's my granddad. They lived on South Manitou. And so with that, they was able to get all the stuff off the boat for the mill and for the house. And there was a couple things that Captain Anderson had given my great-granddad and my grandmother. That was that desk, and that was that secretary. Now, those two things are still in the family today. So now I told Marin, I said, it was too bad back in 1906 that your granddad had given that stuff to my grandmother because he didn't even imagine that we'd have that, and we weren't going to let you have that back when we found out that it was your granddad. So what a bit of history that I learned in the last couple months. Here's a picture of the partly completed dock. On the other side of the dock is a J.S. Krause, which is it's called a, let me back up 1 minute. The Josephine Dresden was the first boat, the one that come up on shore. That was the first boat that was on the Great Lakes that had an auxiliary gas engine. That was the first one. But there again, but then he bought the Krause, which is called a steam barge, because they had sails and they had steam engine. Now, if you notice down here in the, goodness sakes, I'm too quick with that, Matt. Sorry about that. 80 years old, I used to be able to control things like that better, but not now. Did I need to wait for you, Matt? Okay, here we go. Gotta get the button. Okay, down in the lower left corner, you see what's laying there? That's the remains of the Josephine Dresden. And also right next to it, right there in the shoreline, is some more poles for the dock piling. Here's the finished dock, 600 feet long, and you can see it's wider out at the end. And there's remains of the Dresden up here on shore. Now, take a look here at the finished dock with the lumber stacked up, lots of lumber stacked out on the wide end. And remember that that 600 feet clear back to shore, and look at the amount of board feet, if you could have any idea how many would be there in that lumber that's in that lumber pile there on shore. And take a look at the guy up on the mast. Whoever took the picture had to be on the other mast. They had to be a lot braver than what I am, I can tell you that. Now, this is a 1927 picture of the dock. I only put that in here because we're in the dock mode. And you'll see that again later on. But look at the amount of layers of lumber that it took to put that on there. But imagine, they unloaded 12 Russell logging cars and 3 Shea locomotives off and on that dock. So it had to be pretty substantial to hold all that. This is about 1931 or 32 with piling that you see. This is a little blurry, but it's 1938. Now, this is 3 years ago. I got messing around with Google Earth, and I thought, well, I'm going to take a look and see what I can see over at the Crescent. And lo and behold, when you get home and you got a still day or whatever, take a look. You can see the full length of that dock. You can see the wide part. You can see the narrow part. And that was only about 3 years ago. So to think that that don't last quite a while underwater, I'm not sure how long it will last underwater. Now, we're in the process of building the mill. It's a 2-story mill. They're building a conveyor that has a bull chain in the middle of it, and it goes down to the pond, the mill pond, or soup hole, they call it. Over across the way, if you can see the wiggly dot, that's the hotel over there on the left-hand side. All these buildings were built back in the day of the Crescent era, and they're all built then. Here's another picture. Got the 2 stacks up. Now you'll notice some stacks. I'm going to show you the foundations in a little while here. But look at you can see the guy wires if you look close that are tied up holding them 2 stacks. Have no idea how far they are up. Oh. What did I do, Matt? Okay, this is the picture where they're driving piling for the mill pond. And actually, there's been a couple accidents out there. It's not without having troubles. And AJ had broke his ankle when they were building, driving piling for the mill pond. Now, if you notice, clear up in the background, the AJ White home, and that backs right up to the bluff on Lake Michigan's on the other side of it. Okay, here's a picture of the mill. It's all complete and running. If you notice up on the top part, you'll see the wagons and the trailers that they use to bring lumber across. You'll notice a tramway out of the backside of the mill. Tramway went over to the mill pond. It went over to the lumber yard and went to the docks. Now, if you notice down below where the carts are down here, that lower part is where all the edgings and the edgings and stuff off the logs came off from, and they hauled that out to the piling with slabs and edgings. The next one is sawmill and crews. Now, this is looking from the north, looking to the south, kind of. If you look clear off to the left, out in the lake, you see the wide part of the dock. Looks like it's right on shore, 600 foot long, remember. And you see the tramway here in the foreground, and look at the board feet that are stacked up there waiting to be transported by water. And you can notice A.J. White home clear over on the back part again in the mill, in the back part where all the lumber comes off from. Here's a picture of all the crew, one of the crews that works at the mill. We've got names of all them people in our book, and it's interesting. The one guy I need to point out is my grandma's brother and A.J.'s son, Jim, right there. I guess, well, if you can catch up with that, you might be able to, but I can't. Now, this is 4 big boilers that were there that had to be fed. You can count them. There's 4. The guy with the shovel is Mont White, that's A.J.'s brother, and the guy on the left is Billy Good. But all those boilers had to be drug across the 4 or 5 miles across land because they couldn't get them on the dock and get them brought up that way. So those had to be brought cross country, that 4.5 miles or whatever it was. Okay, here's a picture. Here's a picture of one of the steam engines that was there. I want you to kind of keep track of it down at the bottom by the guy's foot. See that cement foundation? You're going to see that later on here. And so remember what that went with this one. Now you notice the belt going up the left-hand side. Going up the left-hand side, it goes up to a flyball governor. Every engine that runs with anything, your lawnmower, there again, don't pick on my knowledge, but anything that's got an engine has got to have a governor. That's called a flyball governor. If you look up there as that gets going, and it keeps a certain RPM with that engine. That's why everything's got a governor. This is inside the mill. You can see the carriage there that the 2 guys are riding. They ride this carriage. Now it's got two big circular saws. One on the bottom that you can't see out in front of the first guy, and the top saw. Now when they've got big logs to saw, and the bottom one won't take care of it, it's too big around, the diameter, this top saw will come down. It's called a top saw or drop down saw. Here's a saw sharpening room. You can see this one of the size of the big saw on the right-hand side, and then smaller ones up there. Now these saws back in this day had to be filed and they had to be set. Set means each tooth had to be pitched a little bit left and right, every other one. But the saw blades today takes an insert that you just put inserts in. So, and that's but these didn't back then. Now this is a picture in the wintertime, of course, and this is one of the first times you can see the mill down here, the mill pond or soup hole. Now, if I talk about 2 different times about different things, and I mention it 2 times, there'll be 2 reasons. Number 1, I forgot that I said it the first time, and the second reason is you people have forgot what I said already the first time. So now, if you look up beyond that left-hand stack, you'll see the roof of a barn. That's up on Main Street. That's got to be a few thousand feet way to the back. And on the left there again, you can see the hotel. Now the guy down on the pond that's bringing the logs over to the bull chain, he's got a pike pole. It's got a hook on the end, and it's long, and he's able to fit with that. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, over here you can see the power lines, because the mill produced power. As long as they had anything that could make a wheel turn, they could generate power. They had a plant that would do that. So the mill, the hotel, all the buildings had power in them at the time, clear back in 1907 to 1915. Now, here they're unloading lumber on top of the piles there. Now, and you can see the tramway behind them. You can see the cart and the horse and whatever. Now, why do I say they're unloading it? There's nobody scaling that lumber. They're sticking it up, or they're putting it up on the pile. And in another picture here, you'll see why I say that. Somebody else got a different idea, just keep it to yourself. So anyway, but what I want you to notice is I want you to see the horse's hooves. Look at the horse's hooves. Horses got shoes on, steel shoes. Look at the size of the studs on there. Why do you think they've got studs on there? Can you imagine that wet board, that tramway with ice on it, snow on it, and water? That horse would be upside down without them studs, but you can see there exactly what that looks like. Here's a picture picture kind of thing of the lower boardwalk or the lower roadway. It was quite a wet area where it was at. So they had lumber piled everywhere in the roadway, and you can see how high the tramway is up above. Now, that's my grandma's dog up there that was always around there. That dog came clear from Cedar Run. Now, a couple things I'm going to tell you about the dog. He broke his leg one time. Grandma said he broke his leg, and there was always a doctor. Dr. Murphy was on the island, a mill doctor. His name was Dr. Murphy, and he set that little dog's leg for Grandma because they're vegetarian. Now, a couple other things about Dr. Murphy that I'm going to run by you. On into time, when my grandmother was married, my mother was the first of 4 children that were born at the farm. My mother was born in 20. And who do you suppose brought all those 4 siblings into the world? Dr. Murphy. Okay, now we're at the mill pond, soup hole, and this they got to clean it out because it was for taking off the debris and the sand from all the logs that were dragged through the woods, and so it fills up after a while. So they got to get that clear. Now, a couple things I'm going to tell you about this here. The guy up there in the back leaning on the fence, that's A.J. White. Now, down here on the right is a good picture of the conveyor. The conveyor don't do anything, but the bull chain and shoot. Sorry about that, people. I've got a 2-inch thumb and about a 1/4-inch fitting. Okay, get back to here. Larry's looking at me like I don't know what I'm doing. Well, I don't. So anyway, and you see it goes up to the 2nd story of the mill. Now that bull chain, in February of 1912, A.J. White, that I'm pointing over there, it was in the wintertime. And my grandmother said specifically that he had a corduroy overcoat on. And he was greasing and oiling that head pulley, which the power was up there that turned that chain, wasn't down below. And he got his arm caught in that, his left arm. And so at that point, my grandmother said they could hear him scream clear over to the house. So they let me see here just a minute. So at that point, Dr. Murphy needed more help than what he had. So they got word to Traverse City somehow. I don't know if they had telegraph from the island. Maybe somebody has some idea. I have no idea. Never run across that. They had to get word to old Doc, it was Doc Thirlby in Traverse City that they got a hold of. And he was one of the doctors that came. And Dr. Freilich used to be in Maple City, or on into time was Maple City. Traverse City part of the time don't make no difference. Both of those doctors got over to the island. And I could tell you how they get there, but it'd take too long to tell you. So at any rate, they got over to the island, and it was, like I say, in February, and they took AJ's arm off, the left arm off above the elbow, in the dining room table. Now I don't mean that awkward. I mean that's the way it happened. And how do I know? AJ lived into the 90s. He didn't die till 1958. And so us kids were all over to the farms all the time. And he was around there with that shirt tail tucked up there, that arm. And so, but that's what happened in February. And he told my grandmother and the people that were there. Now, mind you, my grandmother was 12, so she was aware of what was happening. And so he told the people there to take that arm down and burn it in the mill. And he told the doctors they need to get out of there because it's February. We're not going to have good ice for a long time. You won't get home. Now, this is the back part of the mill. You can see the tramway again. And different pictures show all that kind of thing. And the 2 stacks. Now, mind you, you're looking at the back part where all the different wagons are placed in the carts with lumber. All the lumber, all the sawed and lumber comes up there on the green chain. They called it the green chain because it was green lumber. What do I know? That's what they called it. So they get
Benzie
different
Historical
pieces of
Society.
material. I would assume they could put on whatever direction that they wanted to go.
Manitou
Put that
Island.
material out either to the dock.
It's not a very good
In the
presentation.
dock because they haven't scaled any of it.
Mostly about his
But they
ancestors.
very well could have been.
Okay, well,
Now, we're back to the picture where you're seeing the folks unloading. I said they were unloading because they weren't scaling the lumber. Now, I don't think they were scaling that lumber and putting it in that pile, and all them piles that you looked at there to here to know what was what. But I guess that all that's going on the cart, going out on the dock, and they know what's out there. And that the fellow in the black coats got a scale stick and a scale stick and a log scale. It's all in the same one. They use that same stick. But that was my interpretation. If 40 of you people in here got 40 different ideas, I'd like to hear them at question and answer time. Now this is another one of the steam engines that was there, and I'm going to read a little bit here. That was built. Goodness, what do I know? I get this down. That was built by the Union Iron Works in San Francisco. It's the size. The cylinder is 18-inch by 34-inch, 36-inch, and it runs at 80 RPM a minute. If the bed is 21 feet long, and it'll run over 100 horsepower, depending on the amount of steam pressure that you're working with. And again, on the left, up at the top here, you can see the flyball governor and a little belt that runs it. And like I say, every engine's got to have a governor, and that's the flyball governor. Now this is a picture in the spring, obviously, because of the wet area, and the water's everywhere. And you can still see the guy with a pole down there, a pike pole, bringing stuff up into the conveyor of the bull chain. This is, I'm assuming that this has got to be the barn crew, because if you look at the guys in the first row, you'll notice all the curry combs and the brushes that they got. Well, that's all used for taking care of the horses and the animals. And you can appreciate the amount of food that had to be grown over there on the island, food that had to be brought to the island for family and family, friends, and horses. So now this is the first picture that you're going to see of the end of town. The first building you see right here is the men's shanty. The next one, where you can see the bell just beyond it, that's a cook shack. And down the line, this is looking to the north, if I didn't say that, and where the little porch comes out there, that's the post office and the store. Okay, this is the last picture of the sawmill and crew part. If you'll notice, the stacks are down, and all the lumber out there in the pile in the lumber yard still has to get moved. And the engine, one of the shays that are there, the two that are there yet, all of that has to get picked up, probably stuff out of the mill, all the mill equipment, but you see that that's all done. And the last log was sawn on June 10th, 1915 at 8:30 at night. Okay, then we jump into logging and lumber camps. Now, some of the stuff I'm going to try to hurry through a little bit and not do too much, but I'm trying to explain some of the stuff that maybe some of you don't know. Probably all of you know, and I'm the one that don't know. That picture was on the rail going to the woods. Here's a picture of the teams and their teamsters getting ready for a work day, or else being done, who knows. They got, some of them got harnesses on them, some of them don't. But I'm sure that that's not the only bunch of animals, the teams and horses that had to be used that day at Crescent. Okay, remember when we first pictured the big wheels we seen? You notice how the logs are picked up there on the front? And you can appreciate that there wouldn't be only just a little bit in the back that would be dragging. Well, you got to realize that for the horses and wheels, that made a whole lot more easier than skidding them on the ground. The guy up in the back, I just happen to know his name. He's got the can hook. That's Mike. Sure, I know. Anyway, it don't matter. His name's Mike. Okay, now this thing here is the Smith and Hull had bought from the McGiffert Steam Corporation over in Duluth, Minnesota, and they thought they was going to bring that and put that on the railroad, and be able to use that to drag logs in and out of the woods But one of the things they found, it was too heavy for the rail system that they had. Because on into time here, a few pictures, you're going to see that that they didn't have the ties in that was normal. It was all sufficient for bringing the logs to the mill, but it wasn't sufficient for this thing because it was too heavy. It came over by ship. They put it together, but they did find some use for it, and you'll see that in a little bit here. That's just a picture. It looks like they're notching a tree and got a crosscut and some axes. That crosscut there, I don't know if there's different names that people call them. Have you ever heard one called a misery whip? Well, that's what it was, one of the names. Now, if this is a wood screw. Now, if you look real close down here at the ties, you'll see you've all walked on a railroad track. The ties are a lot closer than that, but evidently they didn't need to be for the Shay locomotive weight. The log loads the log weighted, and so that's exactly what you see. And the problem that they found with the sandy soil in the way that was is it was for that big McGiffert steam crane. Now you notice the size of the logs here. Remember when we were in the mill and I said we got a circular saw on the bottom and a drop down saw or a top saw to finish the saw on the bigger diameter logs. Well, you can appreciate why they had to have that. That's a lot of board feet in that. Here's a picture of sleigh load logs when they're bringing them down with the sleigh, and they've got a lot of them piled down there to the left-hand side. You can see the railroad down there. Up on the northern part of the railroad grade, there was lumber camps up there. There was two logging contractors that Smith and Hull had contracted with. One was Davenport Brothers, and the other was E.W. Hatch. Now the Davenport people, that camp was on the inside of the island, and the Ed Hatch was on the outside, on the north side, northwest side of the rail that would be out towards Lake Michigan. This is a picture here where they're loading logs with a boomer, a log boomer or jammer that they called. That wasn't always the way they loaded it, but they happened to have one of them there. Okay, one of the other ways of logging that they did, and it was the last couple of years. I say couple. What do I know? The last few years, evidently in part of the country, the people that have hiked that, and I know there's people that are here that hiked that, can tell me how steep and what kind of grades and terrain there is. And I'm sure that their interpretation of that was that it was easier to take them over, roll them down the bank, which is called a rollaway here, down into the water, as opposed to trying to get them across to the railroad grade or the big wheels or the sleighs or whatever. Now, I might be wrong with that, but I don't think so. So once they got down to the water, this is what was called a log boom. They've had chains and tied logs together. Logs were in the middle, and I assumed that the horses on a calm day like that, they drug them up towards where the dock is, because that was where the skidway is. Now, you see the dock, out on the dock, either tan bark or whatever might be piled out there. Now, this is a skidway. This is where the logs were brought over. And you see the cable coming down there? Well, you'll see what it's attached to here in a minute. It's attached to that crane. So they finally figured out a use for it. So you notice the A.J. White home over there on the left. That skidway comes right up from the lake, and and all these logs are not too far from where the mill pond is. And you can see that they would drag that cable clear down to the lake and bring that up. Now, one of the things, to back up here a minute, I want you to notice that skidway, because in another photograph, I'm going to show you what it looked like in 1927. I've got to stop for a glass of water here. Don't know about you people. Sorry about the delay. Okay, they had a railroad. They had 5 or 6 miles of rail on there that they was able to use, bring the logs in. And in July of 1909 was the first load of logs that was loaded in the woods. And this is the same load that was brought down to the mill by the Shea number 3. And it wasn't far from where the mill pond was. The fellow on the left there, the big guy with the black outfit on and the suspenders, that's A.J. White. Now I'm going to tell you a couple things about the Shea locomotives. There was a number 2 and a number 3 that we know that were out there. They got them shipped out there in 1909. Then my grandma said she scribbled on a piece of paper, literally scribbled. She wrote like I did, and I don't mean that smart. So anyway, and it said, we tried to figure out where the number 2, how it got out there, how it got back. We didn't have too much of an idea. So at any rate, why she scribbled on this paper, it said, one engine went haywire and we had to get a new one. That told us that they had the number 2 out there also. So those 2 were there and that went bad. And so they had ordered a new one from the Shea Locomotive Works down in Lima, Ohio. And that was a limited number 1. So, and you can see the car ferry brought that over. And now what's on the dock, I'm not sure what one that is or what's in the boat or off the boat. But at any rate, that's when one had to go and they brought the new one. And it was May 7th, 1910. And that happens to be the Ann Arbor Car Ferry number 4. How do I know that? Grant Brown told me that. He's the only one that had 1 stack. Okay, this is inside the Shea locomotive. You can see just in the operating area there. And the guy on the left, the fireman, I happen to know that's Dell people. The guy on the right. Oh. Sorry about that, people. I thought I was doing so good, too. I got to back up on here. There we go. Okay, the guy on the left, his name is Dell People, the fireman, and the guy on the right is Joe McFerrin, and he used to be an engineer on the M&N Railroad. That was the one that came out of Manistee back in 1888, up through Interlochen, Lake Ann, into Traverse City and back. And he used to be an engineer on there. Here's another picture on one of the grades with load of log coming in. That's the number 1. That's a Manitou Limited. That's the new one they bought from Shea. A picture of a cut that they hadn't made. It's a little bit hard to appreciate how deep that is, but this next picture gives you a little bit of perception there with how much dirt they had to move to keep that rail grade somewhere near what it needed to be. Now, mind you, even though it was a Shea locomotives with gear drive, they could take on more grade, and the tracks they were a little more forgiving than what most rails had to be. That's why so many logging operations in tough terrain use Shea locomotives. Well, that was one of the Sheas. That was the number 3, and if you look under the part here where the dot is, that's the end of the railroad. It run off the end. It come by the mill pond, and pretty near run into the mill. And how they got that back off of there, they didn't have Elmer's crane there. I know that. Shipping. Okay, here's a good picture of them loading material off the dock, off the wagons. And if you take a good look, you can see how many. Oh, come on. No. You can see how many board feet are already loaded on that ship, let alone what's on the dock that they're loading. Now that's another steam barge. All of them are steam barges except the Stevens and the Stafford. And those were sailing vehicles, and we'll see them in a minute. If you notice on the left, you can see the point, and that's part of the crescent that makes up the crescent, why it's called Crescent, if you notice the shoreline. This is another picture on the dock. Now these are sailing ships that's there with a mast, and the sailing ships from Milwaukee. the Stevens and the Stafford, they came from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, period. And they took a lot of edgings and slabs back. And I have no idea why they took that stuff over there. You'd have thought that in Wisconsin they didn't have trees or sawed any lumber. Have no idea why they shipped a lot of that back, but those two ships did, but they also shipped other stuff. Oh, Matt. I got you. Here we go. Sorry about that. This is a picture that J.S. Krause that Captain Charles Anderson had bought after the Josephine Dresden went to pieces. That happens to be a picture of the mail boat, the Manitou. The mail service come from Leelanau, and it only went to the east side of the island. And it had to go from there by buggy or riding horse or whatever. And in my grandmother's day, it was Paul Molesky. Paul Molesky Sr., they had farm up in the north end of the island. And it was Paul that used to bring the mail across from the east to the west. Now here's a picture of the Stafford. You can see the rough water, and it's milled, or it's moored to the shore there, to the dock, and it's loaded with tan bark, and that's one of the sailing vessels. You see all the material on the dock. Now this is a picture of when it got loose from the dock and got up toward shore. Now the life-saving people came across the land and helped them get stuff out. I don't know how they got that out of there. I've got other pictures that shows of that, but can't show too many. But at any rate, they got that off of there, and on the way, there's another good picture of the crescent-shaped shoreline. This is a picture of the steam barge Fletcher that's taken on a load off the end of the dock. Now, here's a picture of both the Stafford and the Stevens. Now, I'm going to explain something here, and when I get done, maybe you'll have 20 different answers. It looks like they've got a rope tied to that boat here with the sails, and they don't have the sails up on the lead boat. It looks like it should be pulling. So this one's loaded, of course. So what they're doing, I have no idea. But the lady, the gal that with the dot here with the big ribbons, that's my grandmother Esther. Now we're in the schools. Schools and students. I don't have too much there. This is on the east end of the northern end of the Main Street area, if you will. That was started out as a saloon. My grandmother said, and her dad said that wasn't going to work very good. That created too much problem. So they ultimately made a school out of it, and that was their Sunday school building. Now here's a picture of the people at the school. The one on where, if you can see the dot, that's my grandmother there, and one other one would be Belle Helverson. She was a teacher, and this fella here is one of the Groveners. That's see here. Well, I guess it's one of the Groveners that still have the transit up at Leelanau there yet. Here's another picture, if I can point it out. This is a teacher, Belle Helverson, and my grandmother. Now, these two girls here with the dresses alike, if any of you know any idea knowing about any of the Ramies or the Dunlops in Benzie County, this is their people. In fact, the one on the left would be the grandmother to most of them. Just saying. Can't name everybody. We got names, everybody. Now, like every little town on the mainland, they had ball teams over there too. They had 2 baseball teams and a basketball team. Now, the baseball team was called the Manitou Tigers. The Manitou Tigers. Now in the middle is Dr. LaCour, Otto LaCour. After Dr. Murphy was gone, Dr. Otto LaCour was a doctor on the island. And he was there for a while, or I think for the duration maybe. Then he was in Empire some, had a practice down in Manistee, and I think ultimately retired from there in maybe 47, something like that. Now, here's the girls' basketball team. Now, I looked through papers. I had people look through papers. look for information of who they played, when they played, and did they play, and could not find anything. So now, but the next picture that belongs to your Benzonia Academy, which had to be a building right here beside us, right? That was a basketball team in 1911. And do you suppose I could find any more information even about them? No. Somebody look some stuff up and see what you can find for me. But at any rate, there was basketball teams during the day, and they had one out there. Now, the other team that they had was the Red Wings. That was all American, Native American team. So we had the two teams that were out on the island. Okay. Now, town and families. Oh boy, Matt, sorry about that. Okay, Grandma had sketched out a little map that showed where a lot of the people lived, what was going on Main Street, where the roads went, where the railroad went. My granddaughter took that and enhanced that, and it shows where the road is, where the railroad come down to the dock, to the mill, and it showed the lumber yard. But Grandma had done that before she had passed, so we started out with that picture of town. Oh boy! Now, if you notice here, that's the A.J. White home. You see the railroad track in front of it, and you'll notice on the bank that this is before we had the skidway there and dragging logs up from the beach. This is an older picture of earlier than when they were there. I think way back in time, but we didn't have any that showed both of them together, and that was AJ and his wife Clarnell. Now this is my grandmother, about 19. She was about 13, and she was with the year, so this is about 1913. And the little guy that's with her is her nephew, and his name is James Thurlby. Now, is he any relation to the Thurlby Automotive? Yes, he is. James there, his oldest boy, in 1956 graduated from Central High in Traverse, and he started selling auto parts out of his trunk in 1956. This just happens to be a fun picture with AJ's son, Jim, and Billy Good. Another picture of the hotel. Some of the pastimes, playing cards in the hotel. Now you're looking again from the south to the north. You didn't see the barn before. It was there, but that's the barn, and you can see the power lines on the left-hand side. And the cook shack is the second one, and the first one is the men's shanty. They had pool tables in the men's shanty, so they had a handful of things to do. I'm not sure about the bottles in the back there. I guess they had lots of things to do. Now this is looking from the north end on Main Street. There's a picture of the schoolhouse, and on down the way you can see the roof of the post office in the store. In fact, that's right here's what you're looking at. Standing there right behind the horse is Dr. Otto LaCour, and the lady in the buggy is Mary Swanson, whom they got some of the property from that they leased, and her daughter Eva, and goodness sakes, Earl Daly, the guy up there in the back. Okay, this is A.J. Kittern family, and it shows some of the dwellings in the woods there that some of the people lived in. And so, at any rate, we couldn't show a lot of pictures, but I tried to express a little bit of everything we could. Now, they also had Native American families that worked on the island and lived there. So this is one picture of them. Now, this is a picture of the goodness sake, the cook shack. And in the middle is Tracy Grosvenor, sitting down middle. Sitting down there is Tracy Grosvenor. Tracy worked in the butcher shop. He worked inside. He worked in the mill. He did lots of things. And that's, like I say, that's the Grosvenor people that have the transit stuff there yet. It looks like this must be Butcher Day. They got a hog strung up there. Now, here's a picture of dragging cabbage out of the field. And you'd guess that that's a pretty good sized load, but if you can imagine how much it took for people to survive out there. Dave Smith was one of the, right there with a hammer, that's one of the blacksmiths. And I'm sure they had more than that. Now, there's a few pictures that I'm gonna, oh yeah, that I'm gonna show of landscapes. A lot of the pictures, the postcards that were made was by a fellow by the name of Edward Beebe out of Kalkaska. He took pictures of islands, towns. He's the one that's got the book made of Beebe Leelanau postcards. That's him with all that stuff. You can see this was taken at the dock, but look how rough the lake is. If you're looking here, if you look kind of southwest, that's South Manitou over there you see in the background, but look at the size of the waves. Here's another good picture of the Crescent shore. These are clay cliffs up in the north end of the property there that the guys used to have. I don't know, they had played on, climbed on, did whatever they did on their day off. Now we're into the winter season. Winter season here, you can see we've got quite a lot of ice stuff going on. Look at the size of the ice caves. Okay, we're visiting Crescent. Oh yeah, I guess I got to find the right paper. Visiting Crescent in 1927. Up on the roof, up on the roof, if you can see, that's Bert Gray. Two of the people out of the three worked over here. It was Bert and Rose Gray, and that's Perrin Reynolds. This is the old house, what it looked like in 1927, still standing. Now, this is a picture of the dock that I showed you before in the dock portion. And now, you just had a look at it before. Now, if you look way to the far back, there's a barn back there, a great big barn. Now, that barn wasn't there, and it's a long ways there, and you can see it because nothing's growed up very much in between the dock and that way back there. That was built in 1926, I think, by the Angel Foundation, a syndicate, when they were raising cattle out there, and they had deer herds, they had hunting camps, all of that can be looked into and can be found out more than what I know about a lot of it. Now, remember that big slab that engine was sitting on that I told you to look for? You see these three people sitting on it or standing on it? That's that slab. That's that one that engine sat on. Now, if you look to the left, these two big abutments here, I had just figured out the other day. I knew I was dumb, but I didn't think I was stupid. And I come to the conclusion, I couldn't see the forest for the trees, the old saying. There's two smokestacks. There's two great big abutments that need to have something pretty substantial on them. These aren't very big around at the top, just big enough for those smokestacks. So unless somebody can pin me down tonight, tell me that's not what they are, that's what they are. Now, let me tell you one other thing that's a little bit kind of an odd thing. Back in, oh yeah. Well, Matt, I guess I got you screwed up again. Now, on the left is Bert Gray and Rose Gray and Perrin Reynolds. Now, it was Bert and Rose Gray back when they were there. It was Bert and Rose Gray when they went down to Woodson, Virginia and had the mill stuff down there. When they come back, lived in Lake Ann and owned a store there, it was Bert and Rose Gray. Well, when they come out here in 1927, it was Perrin Reynolds and Rose Reynolds. So somewhere along the line, they decided to regroup. What can I say? Okay, remember the slide? That log slide from the water that they was dragging up to the mill pond? That's it right over there on the left, if you can see it on the bank. That's 1927, what it looked like. And I really think these couple pictures of the tractors are on the east side, because they would have had to come to the east side in 27. And if you notice the power pole on the right-hand side up there, that had to be over there. This wasn't over at Crescent. And I'm sure that's stuff that was over on the east side. Now, we're into Esther's return, 1976, 7, and 8. Esther, my grandmother, and a lot of the family come over to North Manitou. And it was a time when the Angel Foundation And the Ruscos, Rita, they were looking after the cabins, the cottages there, and they would rent them out. And my grandma and some of the family is here tonight, used to go out there and they could scour the island and looked at a lot of stuff. And I thought I was too busy to take time to get out there. But anyway, this is Grandma on the boat there, and it would have been George Grosvenor at the time, I think. They'd let her sit in the boat, and we got a good picture. Now this is Grandma up on the home site. She's standing by where the house was. She knew where that was, and I'm sure that's right where it is. Now here's another picture. This would have been, if you'd have been out the mill looking back towards the white home and the skidway that was there, if you look there to the left, where I've got the dot, moving it around, that's where the house sat. Skidway over here on the right-hand side. Now, if you look down in the front and follow my dot, you see that edge of that board, what's left of that little board, that board stuff, that's the edge of the mill pond. I know that it is, because there's no other reason they had anything there. But that's what was left, what you could see in those 3 years that they were going over there. Now here's a picture of Grandma right there by those big cement foundations. So you see how big they are, but yet how small the top was to have to hold up any more than those 2 pipe. Now you see how it's grown up around all there from 1927, that there wasn't any growth of any kind. That's a picture of Grandma with a piece of one of the boats somewhere that the waves had uncovered and the sand uncovered it, and she's admiring that. Anything to do with Lake Michigan, she had to be a part of. This is one more picture of Grandma Sutton, and you can see the background here why it was called Crescent. Now, last August, Kim Kilderhouse up at the Leelanau Museum was kind enough to put together a boat trip for Karen and I and our kids and some of the folks from the museum and the transit people out there. They took us over, and we got off the dock. We got off right there. You see that boat worked really great. And anyway, we went over and was probably over there about 3 hours. Now, if you can see that one piling is sticking up right there, see over on the left-hand side off the shore, look at all the rest of them in the water. You can see underneath the rest of that dock. Can you point that, or can you see that at all? Okay, good. Just another picture of the shoreline. Whoop, here. Now, I need to make one of these about 3 inches wide. I could make it work. Oh, here we go. Now, this is right there where Grandma's house stood. This is me and my wife Karen and our kids and granddaughter Emma that had drew the map. What a great day. That was a bucket list, a bucket. You couldn't imagine the size of the bucket that was on our list. There's a picture of those abutments there. There's one more. Now, this book, when we had written this book, we had put this book in memory of my grandmother, and that was dedicated to her. And now, mind you, this is in 76, 7, and 8. That's what the dock piers or the piling looked like in 78, or along in those years. But we dedicated that book and all that history to my grandmother. And she loved the Lake Michigan, anything to do with it. We used to go over to Otter Creek with her as kids and thrash and get stones, and probably did things we shouldn't have been doing. But anyway, that was dedicated to her. So with that, Matt, thank you for your patience. I thank you for your patience with me and with this.
All right, any questions? And if you would, please make sure to wait for the microphone before you ask.
Knowing the Hall Oval Dish Company, they would have been after hardwoods.
Right.
Is that what most of this logging was, the hardwoods?
Do I know that it went there? It was in the days of the hardwood, because the pine had already been done. In the Overwood Dish Company were the ones that made clothespins, rolling pins, and Overwood dish, anything made out of hardwood. But I really don't know whether not all of that couldn't have went down there. It went for flooring, went for a lot of places, probably Muskegon, Chicago, lots of places, but it would all have been hardwood. Yes.
And, you know, that dock is an awfully exposed position. The west side of North Manitou Island takes a real beating,
Well,
and there's no harbor there.
well, it is, and they knew that, I think, going in. But if you notice, if you look at that dock, that picture that showed the global earth one, you noticed that dock wasn't straight with the shore. It was northwest, northeast, kind of, or northwest it would have been. And I would have guessed they'd done that so they had some protection on the east side of that dock. I would guess. So what do I know?
Now, they probably had to do a lot of repairs every year, after every
Well,
winter.
I would guess, because it certainly had to take quite a lot of beating. Thanks for the question.
I wondered if you know anything about the economics of this logging operation. For example, what it cost to build this dock and the sawmill and the railroad, and then how much money they made off it was a fairly short number of years, really.
Oh, yeah, probably about 7 years. No, I have no idea. I had trouble enough keeping track of the pictures and putting the book together. Sorry about that. It's a good question, but I have no idea where that answer would be. Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to make a comment. My great-grandfather and his uncle were the first settlers on North Manitou, and they picked the site. They built a dock where Crescent City came, and then they had a dock on the east side. So that's where the original docks were.
Well, that had to be Stormer people? Stormer people?
Pickard.
Pickard. Oh, okay. They had a wooding operation over there, didn't they?
They
Back
were
when-
pulpwood cutters.
Back when they was cutting stuff for some of the steamers.
Right.
And when I say that not much went on over there, to what degree of little went on before this went there, not sure about much of that. But
Right.
yeah, appreciate the info. You're right. You're exactly right.
All right, do we have any questions online? Oh, go ahead.
Okay, before we get done, we have got books for sale in the back. You know, not trying to sell you a bill of goods, but any money that's realized from the books all stays here at the museum. And we appreciate you all being here. Now I'm gonna have one more plug. There was a lady of good friends of ours. She lives out in Massachusetts. Her name's Susan Wasserman. And their family owned one of the Chicago cottage roads. In fact, they had 2 different cottages there, and before the turn of the century. Now, she comes every summer, and she had just got done with a book. And part of it's about the west side, some of our stuff, and a lot of it's about the east side, because she grew up through all that. And the name of the book is Stepping Off the Boat. So look online. If you're interested in the history of and more of this, want to see about the east side, it's called Stepping Off the Boat by Susan Wasserman. It's a hardcover, and she done a great job with things. We was able to help her with different pictures and things, and she helped us with some things. So, and I've got to recognize 2 people in here, Vince and Stacy. When we were here and seen the first program, it was about some of the east side of North Manitou. And so, Vince, raise your hand, Stacy and Vince. They did a program here way back, and that's the first one we seen. So we just jumped over and did the other side of the island. So hope we did what little bit that worked with your half. So anyway, appreciate you coming. I would have guessed Matt didn't say anything, and I might have missed it. But I really would have guessed that there must be Moomer's ice cream. Nobody comes this far to see me. I figured it had to be something else.
Thank you, Bill, for the presentation.
Oh, yeah, glad to do what little bit I could.
I've been waiting for this, and I'll be at your back door. Hopefully, there'll be cookies again. My question is, the connection between the Haber Mill in Lake Ann and this operation and maybe the Stormers. You know, the mill in Lake Ann burned in 97, and another fire later. And some of the roads around Lake Ann have familiar names that kind of mesh with, I think, some of the mill hands on North. Could you elaborate on that? please?
Well, it very well, there very well could have, but you see, the M&N went right through Lake Ann. And one of the reasons it did that, it come out of Manistee in 1888, I think it started. Somebody can question. And the reason that Buckley and Douglas owned a lot of property at about 4 or 5 sawmills down on the water. Well, the minute you get back in them days, if it didn't go by rail or boat, you couldn't get anything. So anyway, they had 4 or 5 sawmills, and they needed lots of logs. So that's why they kept building railroad on up the way. So Habler's come up in 1890, built the mill in 1992, but they were shipping stuff. And of course, the whites back in 1906 clear up to 15 and beyond, they were shipping lumber out of Cedar Run. So a lot of that I don't think was tied anything. It may have been, but I know there's some old paperwork that the whites out of Cedar Run used to ship seeding down to a seeding company in Muskegon. Used to ship hardwood down there to them in different places that went on the rail because it could, and it went, the M&N two times a day, went from Traverse City, from Manistee to Traverse City and back in the day. And then ultimately the lumber run out, timber run out, and then everybody was raising potatoes and pickles. And then when that was done, it was done in 1934, the railroad. So at any rate, I'm not sure much tie with that. Don't know. Know a lot of Lake Ann history, but it's by itself. What can I say? Sorry about it.
I can tell you, Pete Stormer wasn't a mill owner. He ran
No.
a series of logging camps
Yeah.
that cut the wood, and then he contracted with 2 or 3 different mills for the logs he got out of the woods. He contracted with Charlie Wright at Errol for a while,
Okay.
and then he got a better price from Wilsey in Empire, and Charlie Wright was not very happy about that and almost shot him. And whether he had activities on the islands, I have no idea, but he was active log cutter around the Empire area.
Well, he did in 1910, to be exact. 1910, he had a the Newhall family owned a lot of the island. They were in a bind. And so at that time, he made a contract with the Wilts Company, which the Empire Lumber Company started, I think, in 1900. And they'd been there since then, the big mill stuff. Of course, it burned a time or two. But they made a contract with Pete Stormer to get the logs out of the middle and the north end. Well, they brought them down to the dock with the big wheels and sleighs or whatever, and they loaded the logs on the boat, and the boat took them over to Empire. And on the other side of the island, we're taking logs down to the mill, and we're shipping lumber on the boats. So I'm not sure how that worked with, not the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, I don't think. But anyway, you're exactly right. Pete did a lot of that kind of thing, and it was in 1910, I know. It specifies that he was doing stuff then, yeah.
All right, let's give Billy another round of applause.
Oh.
please.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you.